The challenge this week was Eau Rouge by Rivaz, stroke Zerval, stroke Young Bright Hawk, stroke Babushka, using Nodo's favourite muscle car. My aim for this race was to secure my place in Division 2 for next week, then use the gap between myself and the leaders to judge how much I need to improve by if I'm ever going to see Division 1 before the end of the season. My times in practice already suggested that it was going to be an uphill struggle, but you never really know until you get on the track and see how you cope over a race distance. The top places look to be secured by the likes of Tommy, Joker, Yaroon, Yamit and Scoped, but a promotion spot was still up for grabs if any of those guys hit trouble. And already, judging by the gap between myself and the lead pack after the opening few corners, that was something I needn't worry about. Now, a tight hairpin turn and a car with a wide turning circle was always going to cause problems on the opening lap, and so it proved. Despite managing to avoid the mess, I still lost out somehow. Tilko was very opportunistic there, gaining 2 places and grabbing the curb line on the left. At this point, I was just happy to avoid a bigger accident at that corner and carry on settling into the race. As long as I wasn't losing touch with the cars in front of me, then I was in a good place mentally. The only thing which was distracting me slightly at this point was lag from other drivers. Even with 2 drivers who have fast and stable connections, you're always going to have to be careful when running close to one another. As you can see with Colin ahead of me, it's difficult to anticipate what his car is going to do, even when he's driving cleanly. This would have been a bigger issue for me had I had the pace to keep up with him. Once the race settled down a bit, some of these guys were just going to pull ahead of me. Still, it was useful at this point to stick with the pack and hopefully get pulled into a higher position than if I was just running on my own. Unfortunately, Yaroon going into the back of me meant that I lost touch with the 2 ahead of me, and so a defensive drive was starting to look like the name of the game today. At this point, a top 10 was starting to look unlikely. However, there was still a long way to go and several drivers ahead who could yet hit trouble. As you can see from the minimap, the lead pack is still relatively close despite me not having the best first lap. Coming out of the hairpin here, if you look to the right, you'll see big boy Papa Schultz for some reason over the other side of the wall. Turns out he had a coming together with Scoped, who didn't see him coming across the track. So already that's 2 promotion contenders potentially out of the race. Further into lap 2, Tilko's fortune ran out as he got caught up in the fences on the outside. I was starting to get a nosebleed being all the way up in 6th. Time to sit back down and let Yaroon through, who was clearly quicker than me at this point. Again, I wanted to benefit from having a faster guy ahead of me, but considering he was around 2 or 3 seconds a lap faster in practice, I wouldn't be holding on for much longer. Coming round to start lap 3, I thought rather than lose time defending for the whole race, I'd get my pit stop done early. The big risk here was that the blade is very fragile even with 100% armour. Even a small crash is enough to dramatically alter the car's handling. I was banking on my smooth driving and other guys battling to keep me around this position once all the stops were completed. As I mentioned in my race 3 video, a lot of time can be lost when battling others, especially on a tight track like this, where it's hard to keep up the pace using alternate lines. I might be slower than a lot of the guys here, but being in clear air was going to be a big advantage for me. Pretzel opted to start last given how little practice he had on this track, and unfortunately for him this was a track and car combo which would catch out the unprepared. And further along, a small mistake from Dino gave me a good run on him approaching the hairpin. If he could have grabbed the brake boost then he might have kept the place, but on this occasion I had enough overspeed to take the inside, stay tight to the apex and force him into outbraking himself, possibly in fear of me out overshooting the corner. A bit further on, I noticed that Yamit was quickly gaming on me. He lost out the most at the hairpin on lap 1 and was making up for lost time. I decided to let him go again for the same reason as I did with Yaroon earlier, but I also didn't want to get caught up in his lag and lose out on all of the progress I'd made. At this point I was still on course for a 6th or 7th place finish after all the stops. Coming up to the corner where Tilko crashed earlier, and would you believe it, Yamit's lag took down the fences and got my car stuck. I tried driving out of this mess, but the only thing I could do was respawn, costing me a total of 20 seconds. All that time spent worrying about other people's lag, and I was stupid enough to follow Yamit through the risky line, knowing that the fences could easily come down. These things happen unfortunately, but I still feel annoyed at myself for forgetting to do something so basic. All was not lost though, as I was still running inside the top 10, but now I had to worry about keeping Shady behind me. Looking back at this part of the race, I think I allowed myself to believe that I would just pull away from him and secure an easy 9th, but as you're about to see, he wasn't going to let me get away without a fight. This was only one lap after getting caught up in the fences, so I was counting on regaining my rhythm. As it turns out, I had little more to give, and the second half of the race turned into a nice battle with Shady, who surprised me given the results of the previous races so far. So what have I learned from all this? Well, the first thing I absolutely need to stop doing is letting the faster guys go through without putting up a fight. And I don't just think this because of the fences thing, rather it allowed me to carry a weak mindset into my driving. All of the talk in the D2 chat before the race was about some guys were hoping that the roadblocks in front of them wouldn't ruin their race. I still maintain that this way of approaching racing is very arrogant and unnecessary, but my performance in this race only served to enforce that behaviour. In the future, I'll make sure to fight for every place and concentrate more on myself rather than worrying about other people's races. The other thing I took away from this was the importance of speed carry through the corners over simply correct line placement. For the most part, I was placing my car correctly for the turns, but the faster guys were carrying much more speed than me through the corner itself, and were thus faster on the straights afterwards. I put this down to throttle control and the ability to attack an apex without the fear of hitting it and losing all of your time. What you may notice about my driving is how reluctant I am to attack the apexes, which results in my line being compromised on the exit, and puts my car in a lower gear when I should be maintaining the entry speed. This is an area of my ability which I'll admit taking for granted thus far. It again comes down to this complex I have with myself, where it's speed versus consistency. If I want to improve myself, then I need to be convinced that I can have both. This is where I see the value of playlist racing in this game. It allows you to experiment with different approaches to driving on a variety of tracks and cars, and against other races with a variety of talent. If you focus too much on hot lapping a track for an event on your own, then you're limiting yourself to what, or how much rather, you're able to learn about your driving. Going into COTM, I naively believed that I could focus my spare time on hot lapping to make up for the tight schedule that I have. Even though I gained a fair amount of track knowledge this way, it ultimately meant that I was lacking in confidence with the car. For all of the laps that I put in, I can't say that I properly understood this car at all. Perhaps using it in one or two serious playlists would have given me the chance to experiment with my driving without the pressure of it being a big event race. So as you can see, Shady has had a few goes at getting past, and I've been able to hold on to the place for now. If it wasn't for this battle, then I might have left this race a little downcast, but it turned out to be a lot of fun, and it gave you guys something to watch whilst I go off on another ramble. The big positive to take away from this was the fact that when I switch my focus to defending, I'm still able to do a decent job and not get flustered by the chasing car. Obviously I made one or two mistakes during this battle, but chances are I would have made those mistakes on my own anyway. All I need to do now is stop focusing too much on who I should and shouldn't be battling with, and make sure I stay ahead of just everyone. Coming towards the end of the race now, and one mistake could easily increase the pressure of being relegated from D2, with Dino looking to pounce should we crash. In this case, Eau Rouge claimed another victim, and as you can see from the minimap, Shady has made a mistake, which means I can bring the car home and relax for a bit. On reflection, it's reassuring to know that without my unnecessary crash at the fences, then I would have been up there fighting for 6th or 7th. But considering the guys ahead of me also had big crashes, it turns out that 9th was an accurate reflection of my pace. Anyway, thanks again for watching, and I'm hoping that a supercar on a faster track is going to improve my fortunes for round 6.
Get in there, Lewis boy. Beautiful work, lovely managed race.